Welcome, everybody. This is the school year 2019-20 directory and grades offered in CCD school webinar. Personally, I'd like to welcome you. My name is Jess Green, and I'm with the Partner Support Center. Information on joining the webinar, if you're looking to find the sound, the login information, it can be found in the Information tab or the Info tab in the upper left corner of your screen. Make sure to enter your attendee ID when dialing in so that it associates your name with your phone. Just so you know, to reduce any background noise, we have muted everybody upon entry. If you want to take second precautions, you can always mute your own phone as well. At the end of this webinar, we will try and leave time for questions and answers. So if you do have questions and answers, if you do have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A panel. Try not to enter them in the chat panel, which is below the participant list, and then you're going to click send, and we'll address any of those questions as time permits at the end of the webinar. As a reminder, a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording will be posted to the EdFact community site, and an announcement will be in the future support update. And then if you could, at the end of the presentation, once it's ended, there will be a survey. If you could please take a few minutes just to complete that, that's going to allow PSD to improve future webinars based on your thoughts and feedback of this webinar. So we would really appreciate if you could take the time just to finish that at the end. The agenda for today is to provide an introduction, a high-level overview of the 029 directory file, the 039 grades offered file, and the 129 CCD school file. Those are known as the skeleton files for EdFact reporting, so we will review those. We're going to review some changes to the CCD business rules that took place for this upcoming school year. We're going to review the EMAP survey, the graduates and completers survey. And then at the end, like I noted, if there is time, we will go over questions that we've received, again, in the Q&A panel. Again, my name is Jess Green. I'm with the Partner Support Center, and joining me today is Chin Su, who's the CCD lead with the Elementary and Secondary Branch at ED, otherwise known as ESB, as well as Beth Sinclair, who's the Data Management Team lead for the Data Management Team. The expected participants of today's call are the EdFact coordinators and the CCD non-fiscal coordinators, as well as anyone else that maybe submits this data on the state side. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Chin Su and Beth Sinclair.
Hi, everyone. This is Chin Su Chen from CS. I just joined the team about 2-3 weeks ago. As all of you know, that Mark Lander retired at the end of last year, and Patrick Keaton has been filling in throughout the year, and I just officially joined the team. And today's goal is we want to highlight some changes for the school year 1920, and also help you guys when you prepare the data files for submission, and so we can continue to improve the data quality and also reduce the burden on you guys. It's a lot of work, hard work from you guys. So whatever we can do here to help make your life easier, we will do it. And hopefully this webinar will do it. And then file submission advice based on what the CCD team sees during the data quality follow-up in the prior year.
Thanks, Chin-Su. So as Chin-Su said, we are constantly trying to improve data quality, and we've found that it's helpful to give data providers as much information up front as possible. And, the business rule single inventory is a good example of that. And so what I want to highlight during the slides on these three files is changes from past years, and give you some thoughts on things you should be careful about when you're preparing your data files that we've seen in data files from a variety of states, and we see these type of imprecisions, we'll call them, often enough that we think it's worth mentioning. So let's talk about file spec changes. The file spec changes are really very slight between 1819 and 1920. For the directory file, there's some additional guidance on how to report schools at multiple locations. We do provide an extra tip to make sure, to remind states to make sure that you use the identical charter authorizer identifier across all files. And there's also a new tip in there about the sequence of steps you need to take in a file submission to change an LEA from, a school from one LEA to another LEA, shifting it if a school changes LEA. So there's some additional advice in there. As you can see, that list doesn't reflect, that list doesn't indicate any big changes. These are all additional refinements to guidance. In the grades offered file, the information that I'm going to actually talk about in this presentation, the eagle-eyed presentation webinar, kickoff webinar people will recognize, is the guidance about no grades versus ungraded has actually been added to the grades offered file specs. So that advice that was provided last year in the webinar that I'm going to repeat here has basically been formalized and made part of the file specs, and there are no changes to CCD school file spec. So let's think a little bit about the assumptions that have to do with what, if a school or a district is in your directory, what is expected of that school or district. Number one, any operational school is expected to have at least one grade or be ungraded. So this is part of NCS's definition of school. No grades equals yes is actually invalid for operational schools. And this is one of the things that we were working on at the beginning of the 1819 follow-up. We had about 900 of those, and through working with states, we're down to under 300. They provided some explanations for why they were still using that combination, but we're really trying to make things more precise. The thinking is that if you have a school that does not offer any graded instruction but is serving children, those children, the school would be flagged as offering ungraded instruction instead of no grades. So additionally, any operational school is also expected to report membership. That membership can be 0, and if it's unknown, it should be reported as missing rather than left off the file. And membership values then are only valid for a non-operational school. So let's dive in about, there's some, things get a little difficult, of course, in the corners of this collection. And small schools and small LEAs with no students are a challenge, especially in rural areas. You may have an instance where you have a school that doesn't have enrollment for this particular year. So a small school with staff, even if the staff is unknown, would have a status open, and with no students enrolled, you would just report the EUT as 0. But if you do not have any staff, then you need to report that school as inactive because it doesn't meet the threshold of what it needs to be a school, and you should not include that school or LEA in the membership file. So another example, something to do with the directory, is this interaction with the expectations for parents and children. I'm referring to school districts as the parents and schools as children, what the expectations are as far as parents and children for 3 specific LEA types. Where the expectation is that a school district that is LEA Type 4, which is a service agency, would not have any schools. So it has no children. But that regular and specialized public school districts would always have schools. So you wouldn't have a regular school district that did not have at least one school, one child. But you would also expect that any service agency would never have children. So I'm just letting that soak in. And keep in mind that one of the reasons we do these webinars is because these are things that we are also looking for as we do the data quality follow-up. So Chen-Su was talking about reducing burden. If this is, it's much easier to correct an issue that we're going to fuss about before you submit the file. So just keep these in mind. Or submit a note with your SSD because we will read this. So I touched on this, but operational schools and LEAs are expected to have at least one grade offered and student membership. And if they don't have that, please submit an SSD note that explains what's going on with that. So let's go into ungraded versus no grades because this is a little bit thorny. But ungraded is students served in an education unit in a school district or a school who are not assigned to a grade. This could be a credit recovery school where all the children come to, all the young adults come in at a certain grade and they aren't assigned a grade. It could be a special ed school. It could be a school without walls where everyone is ungraded in the school. But that is the grade that's offered. The grade that's offered is ungraded. A school might also have K-12 plus ungraded. No grades means that it is either non-operational or it's an LEA that provides support services and doesn't operate school. So in that case, what we're looking at is we're looking at a school or a district that literally does not offer instruction in any grades, including ungraded. And keep in mind, as a side note to the grades offered file, we appreciate that schools may offer grades and not have any students enrolled in those grades. A rural school that only has 30 kids enrolled may offer grades K-12, but they may only have children in their local community who are in grades 6, 7, and 8 that year. The only instance when we're checking things, if there is a preponderance of children in a grade that is not marked as offered, we will switch something over from, in the final file, we will update a flag to indicate that that grade is offered because the state has reported a large number of students in that grade. Next slide. So I did want to, the next set of slides are all things to keep in mind. One is odd characters that are problematic for end users. If your school or district has an ENYE, and ENYE is a good example, but some other odd characters, the most frequent one is the ENYE. If it's in the school name or the district name, it will do odd things unless you save your file with this additional advice on using the CSV UTF-8 instead of the DOS version. We've experimented with that and it's worked to solve this problem. So just keep that in mind. Every once in a while we get a data user who calls us up and is grouchy about that. It also leads to a very weird looking sort because right now the top in the 1819 directory, there's one state where the first school on the list is one of these. And also we have a couple instances where states include backslashes and some other weird things, and those can sometimes be read as delimiters. So unless you have a really great reason to have that in a school name, it would be great if you could just work through getting rid of those with time. Next. So let's talk a little bit about CCD school. One of the, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're, a lot of our comments from this webinar come from us doing follow-up and doing kind of post-edit checks on the data files. And one of the things that we're noticing is that there's more volatility than we would expect in the number of schools states are reporting as not Title I, this is in the CCD school file for the Title I status. There seems to be a lot of fluctuation in a few states, and I say a lot of fluctuation like 500 or 600 schools from one year to the next who are flagged as not Title I eligible, and then they're shifted over to Title I eligible but no program, or school-wide eligible no program, and then they'll switch back. And we aren't expecting there to be no change, but we also are, this is a variable that we would anticipate that the criteria would not change a whole lot from year to year. We would expect a few schools back and forth. We wouldn't expect hundreds of schools to switch. So we just want to highlight that the permitted value not Title I eligible, the first one on that list, is these are schools that are not Title I schools and they're not eligible for the program. The second group are schools that are Title I eligible but are not operating a Title I program. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're preparing your file. And if you compare it to what you submitted for 18-19, and there's big shifts in this, it would be helpful if you look at it, you think about it, if you just kind of write that on the sticky so that when we ask you about it, you can just read off the sticky. That would be helpful. But that is something that we are working on tightening up a bit. So shared time status is another flag in the CCD school file. Shared time status is an indication that school is a school where students attend, but their membership is reported in another school. A good example of this is a vocational school where the children attend the school part of the day, but their official membership is reported in their home high school. So it is perfectly fine for shared time status schools to have no pre-K students, but please report the zeros to make it clear that it's not missing data. Also, there are a few, we have shared time status as missing for statewide in a few states and in large numbers of schools in some other states. We would really like to see that start to get resolved. That's been a variable that's been in place for a long time, so we would really like to see that get resolved. So virtual status, this we talked about last year as well. For years, virtual status was just a simple yes/no. And I think in a lot of states, the way they assigned this was to basics, because virtual schools were fairly unusual. And I think in a lot of cases, the assumption was that the virtual status was equal to no, unless they knew that school was a full virtual school, essentially a non-brick and mortar school. But a couple of years ago, EdFAC switched virtual status to provide a little bit more nuance. There's full virtual, which is the equivalent of the old yes, and there's not virtual, which is the equivalent of the old no. But there's supplemental virtual, and there's another one which for some reason I don't have on the slide. But we want states to think a little bit more holistically about this variable, not to continue to think about it as just virtual yes/no. And I provided a couple of examples of schools that Ed would consider to be to move away from the not virtual category to supplemental virtual. These are schools that provide remote instruction in the language or AP classes for small schools, computer programming, other subjects. And what I've seen in the news increasingly is virtual instruction for weather events. There's a local school district in Maryland that just a couple weeks ago said that they were no longer going to have snow days because all the children had the ability to receive instruction if they are not able to get to school. So there's no right answer here, but we do want people to take advantage of all of those permitted values if they can. It is my understanding that for big studies like EMAP, they still continue to only consider full virtual. They still treat it as a yes/no, but it would be nice to have a little bit more nuance on that since that's available. So we have made some refinements to business roles. No wholesale changes. All of the business rules that were in place before continue. There are a couple here that we've highlighted where we are working to continue to refine the questions that we're asking to improve the data. The directory one that I have listed is that if you have an independent charter district, the charter LEA status can't also be NA or not charter. This is just a logic check, and we found a few instances where that was the case. And this grades offered one is one that we put in that will be in the DMS this year. We had instances where the district level grades offered did not include some of the grades that were offered, that were reported offered at the school level. So our new check, so if you have, if all of the schools in your district are K-6 schools, your district record shouldn't say that the grades offered in the district is just K-4. It needs to at least cover the schools of the children, the grades offered of the children in the district. And charter, I want to highlight that a little bit as again, the eagle-eyed watchers of CCD, which may be a small number of people know, CCD did not release a whole lot of charter data. There are more charter files submitted that are not part of the CCD public file releases. We released the charter authorizer data and charter yes-no for charter status, but there's some additional information about the charter authorizer and kind of a whole network of information about charter there in some additional files. The Charter Program Office is doing additional checks on that data, and that's actually the source of the charter advice that's in the directory file about making sure that you use the same ID code for your charter authorizer throughout your submissions. And I just want to highlight that because it's part of the effort to continually improve the quality of the data. And even though the charter files aren't all part of CCD, they are part of what we would consider the core data. And I suspect that looking way into the future, there's a time when they may be included in the CCD. As a side note, we also partner with the Charter Program Office to verify that all of the schools that they have as receiving charter school program grants are also included in the CCD. And a full list of the BRS, the Business Rules Single Inventory, all of the CCD edits are in there. And if you go to that file and filter for DMS, you'll get all of the business rules that are CCD related. So CCD EMAP. Before I turn it over to Jess, I want to make the point, there was some confusion a couple of years ago about how CCD EMAP interacts with the data that states submit as part of the data quality follow-up. And it is set up to interact quite smoothly, particularly on the left-hand side of those bullets, the ungraded, grade 13, and adult ed instruction. For example, if you as a state report on your EMAP survey that you do not have ungraded instruction in your school, the first bullet, in any of the schools in your state, I'm sorry. If you report that, we would expect that on your membership file, you would leave those records off. You wouldn't even report zeros, but you certainly wouldn't report any children classified as ungraded. And we'll ask you about that during the data quality review. And the reason when Jess shows this to you that the EMAP reopen period coincides with our data quality review is that using the example that I gave, a state has said that they don't have ungraded students, but they submit 1,000 ungraded students in the membership file. That's a disconnect. And the solution could be to resubmit membership or to resubmit EMAP to now say that you have ungraded students. So take it away, Jess. Talk to us about EMAPs.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, so I'm going to go over EMAPs with you guys. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with it. But for those who are not, EMAP stands for EdFacts Metadata and Process System, which is a web-based tool that is used by the department to provide states with an easy method of reporting, maintaining information on state policies, plans, and metadata to aid in the analysis of data collected. So just as Beth mentioned, they use the EMAP surveys, which collects metadata, and sometimes it's compared to EdFacts data that's submitted through the EdFacts submission system. So it is just as important as submitting your EdFacts data files. There are some updated system requirements with EMAP that I want to review. First and foremost, EMAP is now compatible with most browsers. Chrome is the most recommended. That's where we've noticed that all users get the most performance. Something else we've noticed is that Microsoft Edge is not very compatible. You'll most likely get an error upon logging in. So if you can at least just stay away from Microsoft Edge and use Chrome as much as possible, but it is still compatible with Internet Explorer. EMAP, this is the same. It will automatically log you out after 30 minutes of inactivity. If you've been in EMAPs recently, you'll notice that the survey is now open in new tabs. So every time you click a link for a new survey, you could have 4 different surveys open in EMAP if you have access to 4 different surveys. And if you're working on at least one of them, that does not qualify for the inactivity. But if you have 4 tabs open and then you navigate to a different website and you don't touch EMAP for 30 minutes, it's going to automatically log you out. So just make sure you're saving any data as you're navigating away from those tabs. The other thing is EMAP used to be unavailable for maintenance on Sunday evenings, but that has changed to Saturdays for most of the midday of Saturday. It's going to be from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., and that is regularly. So anytime on Saturdays, if you're logging in between those times, you will be unable to access anything. So the CCD Grades Offered Graduates and Completers Survey, it's going to open on, it already opened on December 9th, which was Monday, and then it's going to be open for quite a while. It'll close on March 18th, 2020. Then the CCD team will take those data and they'll use them in their CCD data quality review. And then there's going to be a reopen period later next year, June 1st to July 2nd, 2020. So it seems far away, but it's right around the corner. We're going to go over a couple of the changes for the survey this year. One of the biggest changes that affects all EMAP users is that EMAP passwords now have minimum requirements. Before, you could actually reset your password to anything, but that recently changed. So we have updated all of the EMAP user guides, including the CCD Grades Offered user guide. So if you happen to forget this, that's okay. But once you go, if you use the Forgot Password button and you try to reset your password, you do have to have these requirements. Another update is that the question, for which of the following does your state collect data? It's now a single checkbox. The membership questions that are regarding counts for pre-K reporting, which includes the inclusion of Head Start, children with disabilities, or state-funded preschool programs, and the significant differences in data between educational levels, those are now separated out. So you're going to see 2 new questions for those. Additionally, this is just kind of a functional side note, timestamps will now be updated on the States Report tab if the survey is resubmitted with no changes. So previously, if you, during the reopen period, for example, logged into your CCD survey and you noticed that everything was accurately reported, so you responded to the data quality that the data was reported as expected. If you happen to resubmit that survey when not making changes, in the prior survey, they would not re-update that timestamp. But now that timestamp's going to update to show that you actually did resubmit the survey. So it's kind of good for documentation purposes. And then just a quick overview of the different automated emails that you are going to receive from EMAP. If you have been an EMAP user for a while, you're probably familiar with these, but CCD coordinators and EdBack coordinators do receive CCD grades offered and completers survey automated emails. You should have got one on Monday, yesterday, letting you know that the survey was open. You also get one when the survey is submitted. Attached to that is going to be a copy of the HTML report of all your responses so that you have that for documentation. You can also access a copy of the survey in the State Reports tab. So if you don't happen to save that one, it's okay. There is a copy in the database. You'll also get an email if your state hasn't started the survey 15 days prior to the close date. You'll also get, and that does include weekends. So if 15 days prior to the close ends up to be a Saturday, you'll get an email. All states will actually receive an email 3 business days before the process closes, just to let you know it's closing. And then during the reopen period, states will receive targeted emails depending on whether or not you are identified as needing to resubmit or update any data based on the data quality review that Beth's team, the CCD data management team, conducts. So now I'm going to go ahead and roll it back over to Beth, and she's going to go over some data release information.
Excellent. So the CCD, I want to put in a plug for the CCD and also thank the states as Chensu did. We understand that chasing down all of the questions that we ask as part of the data quality follow-up is it's challenging. It's a lot of work, and we really appreciate the work that you guys do for this. And we also appreciate and understand that we're doing this on tighter timelines than we ever have in the past. But what it means is that the CCD data files are being released to the public more quickly than ever before. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb here saying that the CCD data is it's certainly one of the most used data files that Ed produces. From researchers, the NAEP team used it for their sample frame. We've recently learned that both USTA and United States Tennis Association and Major League Baseball use it as their recruiting database to identify schools. It's quite amazing how far these files go. So the preliminary directory is now being pretty routinely released right at the end of that school year. So the 18-19 preliminary directory was released in July of 2019, and we are anticipating about the same timeline for the 19-20 preliminary directory. The 18-19 universe, it's right here on the list. We are cleaning those files right now. Thank you all for all of your follow-up. That was just around July, August of 2019, and we are hoping to get that out before summer of 2019. The 20, and to be 20. Right. And Chensu is correct. We want to plan to release this summer of 2020, not retrospectively using our Wayback Time Machine. And in fact, if you, in your mind, see that this bottom summer 2019 as 2020, you'll notice it's much earlier. The goal is the 17-18 universe was released in September 2019, and in our end state, we're going to be releasing it much closer to the end of the school year. So again, thanks to all the states for all of their work on the data quality follow-up. We really, you all are really helpful in all of this. Excellent. So this illustrates, it's kind of a whole bunch of things layered on top of each other here. It shows the due date for the files, the stars. It shows our follow-up period and our projected release time for those data files. It is our dream that in the end state, the membership and staffing files will come out just a few months after they're due, 6, 7, 8 months after they're due, which would be fantastic from a user perspective. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. But if you think back to what I was saying about the interaction between EMAPs and our data quality follow-up, you can see the arrows at the top are the open and close for EMAPs. So the green arrow is open EMAPs, red arrow, close EMAPs. Green arrow open, red arrow close. So you can see that what that allows is for us, if you think about the grades offered example, that membership and staffing gray bar, which is the follow-up for 1920 membership and staffing, almost coincides almost exactly, which is not a coincidence, with the EMAP follow-up effort to make sure that if an issue is in your EMAP submission rather than your data files, you can resubmit EMAP to correct an issue. Next slide. So just to summarize, definitely spend some quality time with the file specs. I'm sure everyone already is. This isn't a news flash. They're full of information that's super useful for all of this. Think about the interaction between EMAPs and the CCD data quality follow-up. Definitely provide data notes in the state submission plans and in the DMS. I think that I know that in the early years of the state submission plans, there was a feeling that, I entered that, but no one reads it, so what does it matter? But I think that recent history illustrates that we really take all of that information into account at this point. Watch for, you should always read the Partner Support Weekly Support Update, but definitely when you're reading it, look out for CCD follow-up notes. Also keep in mind, so we do the preliminary directory follow-up, and then we do another follow-up later in the year for all of the files with counts, membership, staffing, all of those. But we do a mini quick review of directory and grades offered during that as well, because some states do make updates to their directories in that period. And always, always, always contact PSC for guidance and advice. And in case you don't have this handy, which seems very unlikely, here is all of their contact information for the fabulous folks at PSC. I think that's everything we have. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Well, Sue, I just want to say again that it's a lot of work, and we really appreciate your hard work. So if anything we can do here to help out, please let us know, and just feel free to reach out to PSC for any questions, or even myself. You probably know my email address. So, but just want you guys to know we really appreciate it, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks, Chin, Sue, and Beth. And also as a reminder for everyone on the phone, when the webinar ends, you will be presented with the survey. So if you wouldn't mind, like I asked before, just take a couple minutes to complete that, and then you guys can go ahead and submit it, which will give us some feedback for future webinars. And also as a reminder, we will post the link to the recording as well as the slide deck in a future support update. It'll be available on the EdVac Community's website where anybody can access it. So if you guys have any additional questions after the webinar, feel free to contact PSC, and then we will work with the DMS team and Chin Sue to get you a response. Again, thank you everybody for joining, and we really appreciate your patience with the technical difficulties we experienced, but hope you had a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks a lot. The first time.